This is CGTN, China Global Television Network.
World leaders make big commitments as they gather online for a summit to tackle climate change. Looking at the impact of climate change in Africa as the world marks Earth Day. And France defends a military takeover in Chad to first ensure security. Hello and thank you for joining us on Africa Live. I am Peninah Karibe, and with me in studio with the business headlines is Uche.
Thanks, Peninah. And here's a look at what's coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya and the DRC enhance trade ties as the two presidents meet in Kinshasa. And hotels in Egypt look to 61% occupancy this year as the sector begins a recovery. Of course, all that coming up within the program. For now, it is back to Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. We begin the hour with the Leaders Summit on Climate, where China says it will phase down coal consumption over the next few years. It's part of efforts to cut down greenhouse gas emissions and become carbon neutral by 2060. The announcement was made by Chinese President Xi Jinping at the virtual summit, where he also called for global efforts to tackle the climate crisis.
We must commit to multilateralism. We need to work on the basis of international law, follow the principle of equity and justice, and focus on effective actions. We need to uphold an international system centered around the United Nations. We need to comply with the UN framework on climate change and Paris Agreement, and strive to deliver on the 2030 Sustainable Development Goals.
President Xi said countries should honor their promises on addressing climate change and protect the environment for a more harmonious coexistence between man and nature. The two-day conference is hosted by the U.S. President Joe Biden, who also announced a new emissions target in his speech.
The United States sets out on the road to cut greenhouse gases in half by the end of this decade. That's where we're headed as a nation. And that's what we can do if we take action to build an economy that's not only more prosperous, but healthier, fair, and cleaner for the entire planet.
France's foreign minister has today defended a military takeover in Chad. This is despite objections from members of the opposition in the Central African nation. Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian has described the takeover as necessary for security amid exceptional circumstances. CGTN's Joy Kiruki Juma reports.
A new dawn in Chad. General Mohamed Idriss Déby, son of slain leader Idriss Déby, taking charge. The Constitution mandates the Speaker of the National Assembly to take over as interim president. But following the shutting down of Parliament by the military, Speaker Haroun Kabadi said in a statement that he had agreed to a military transition. French Foreign Minister Jean-Yves Le Drian says Kabadi's position justified the military taking control.
There are exceptional circumstances. Logically, it should be the President of the Chadian National Assembly, Mr. Haroun Kabadi, who would have led the transition, but he refused because of the exceptional security reasons that were needed to ensure the stability of this country. The Military Transitional Council that has been put in place should now indicate the manner in which it wants to function and should be a factor of security, of course.
The political opposition in Chad has denounced the military takeover. Labour unions have also called for a workers' strike. Idriss Déby was killed on the front lines of a battle against rebels who had invaded from the north. Déby was a long-time ruler for over 30 years. He was considered vital in France's security strategy in Africa. The Transitional Military Council is now expected to hold free and democratic elections in 18 months.
The transition should be started in a serene, democratic, transparent and rapid manner.
Le Drian will accompany French President Emmanuel Macron in attending Déby's funeral on Friday. They are also expected to hold talks with Chad's military council. Joy Kiruki Juma, CGTN.
The late President Idris Deby created a formidable military which sharpened its abilities in various counter-terrorism efforts in Africa. Here's Daniel Arap Moi with Chad's military engagements under Deby.
As the fifth largest African nation, Chad sits at a vantage point in the continent despite being landlocked. It straddles north, west, central, and even the Sahel regions of Africa. This has made it one of the key players in regional counter-terrorism efforts. Bordering Chad to the south is the Central African Republic. In 2013, then President Francois Bozize was overthrown by the Seleka rebels. Chad deployed its troops under the African Union peacekeeping mission. However, N'Djamena was forced to pull out after its forces were accused by locals of siding with Seleka militias. The same year, 2013, Chad became the headquarters for the French-led Operation Barkhane to fight jihadists in the Sahel. More recently, Chad has also been playing a leading role in the G5 Sahel Joint Force formed by France to counter militancy in the Sahel region.
Chad has played a very important role in the stability of the Sahel. The Chadian forces, through their leader, President Idris Deby, invested very early and enormously in the fight against terrorism in the Sahel. From the very first moments of the occupation of the northern Mali by the jihadist groups, and especially by Al-Qaeda in the Islamic Maghreb, we saw that the Chadian forces were truly mobilized. They even won victories, notably in Kidal in the northern Mali, and killed leaders of the terrorist groups AQMI.
In 2015, the Lake Chad region was grappling with the Boko Haram insurgency, which was spilling over from Nigeria. The Chadian military played a key role in dealing with the militants.
Notamment au Mali,
To engage in the fight against terrorism, as President Deby has done, requires that one be truly committed to this fight with the utmost energy. I remember that the leader of the Islamic sect Boko Haram personally addressed President Idris Deby with a lot of bitterness because for him, the Chadian president was their main obstacle. Deby's death will therefore be a major blow in the fight against terrorism. All countries in the sub-region must take the threats of the Chadian rebellion very seriously.
Despite the late President Idris Deby's colorful history in peacekeeping and military interventions in the region, he had also been fighting his wars back home. Before his death, he was battling the fighters of the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, also known as FACT. Daniel Arap Moi, CGTN.
Okay, so let's take you back to that leaders summit on climate that we've been reporting about, and China says it will phase down coal consumption over the next few years. That is part of efforts to cut down greenhouse gas emissions and become carbon neutral by 2060. We've also heard from the US President Joe Biden announcing a new emissions target in his speech. Let's get more from CGTN's Nathan King. He's live for us now from Washington. Nathan, tell us a bit more on the highlights of the climate actions promised by the leaders of some of the biggest economies, which are seen as the biggest contributors to the climate crisis.
Yeah, sorry, I was just checking the latest numbers as you came to me. Yeah, as you know, you may have seen the headlines, that essentially the United States that is trying to reclaim leadership over this climate agenda after 4 years of essentially being absent without leave, AWOL, has agreed now to basically cut their carbon emissions by 50 to 52% from 2005 levels by 2030. That is a dramatic move. In fact, it's essentially double of what they'd promised at Paris Climate Accord, which of course the Trump administration pulled out. We've seen other moves by other countries. Japan, for example, is doing something similar around the mid-40%. As you know, China and Xi Jinping, who was one of the early speakers earlier this morning, has already committed and surprised the world by reaching basically peak carbon emissions before 2030 and essentially net zero carbon emissions before 2060, which sort of set the ball rolling while the rest of the world was coping with COVID at the UNGA summit in September. Disappointingly, India hasn't come up with any sort of new numbers. We've seen some bold words from Australia, one of the biggest carbon emitters when it comes to the OECD 20 biggest economies, but they are not really committing to anything new. So a lot of this, apart from the bold statements from the United States, China, Japan, the European Union, by the way, are much more on track than anyone else, but they are offering accelerated promises as well. But a lot of this stuff is repackaging from a lot of countries. I would look out for people like Brazil, India, Australia, because those are the sort of second tier biggest polluters, and also with the most, let's just say, natural habitat to preserve, especially in Brazil. So that's going to be very interesting as this two-day summit goes forward. But I can tell you, it's really lovely to see 40-plus world leaders all essentially talking from the same script. Because as you know, we have divisions on nearly everything else. And the fact that the US has been absent from climate change agenda at all, and obviously they were trying to reclaim leadership here with some bold promises, but I think we can put the politics aside for the next couple of days and see basically essentially a world recommitted, because the second biggest emitter and the biggest per capita, the US, was it 4% of the global population and between 15% and 20% of the carbon emissions, is back in the game.
Well, Nathan, some of these pledges and commitments to cut emissions and reduce pollution seem ambitious. And in fact, we know that some of them have been made before. So what guarantees are they giving to, in fact, make it happen?
I think you're absolutely right to be skeptical, because let's face it, we've seen promise after promise. The Paris Climate Agreement was meant to be the pinnacle of that. And yet, let's face it, because the US pulling back, other countries have felt a little commitment to do so as well. But the thing is that the way this is being framed is not suddenly we're all committing to something that's going to cost us a lot of money, especially the Biden administration, because there's a lot of climate skeptics in this country. They are framing it as around claiming the economy of the future, that efficiency will create millions of jobs, will save trillions of dollars. Insurers have come out saying without intervention by the big powers, tens of trillions of dollars of the GDP of the world could be at stake by 2050, 2060. So the way it's being framed here, which I think is very smart, is this idea of creating new jobs of the future, both in green energy, but green financing, and also the technology of tomorrow, from lithium batteries to wind power and to mitigating circumstances around the world. The big things and the boring things, I think, are going to be trying to sort of harness all the world together without creating some sort of de facto one-upmanship. But you know what's really interesting is that competition when it comes to climate change is much better as opposed to competition when it comes to the military sphere. Because if countries and companies compete, then you're going to get much more efficiencies. The other things that really have to be worked out here, and the boring on the sidelines, is the way that all this is going to be financed. As you know, China has Belt and Road initiatives and et cetera, et cetera. The World Bank is involved. The US has sort of been absent from global green financing. And that's also going to be competition as well. You know, who can pay for the developing countries to switch over in the middle of developing from dirty fuels that the Western countries used to green fuels at lower costs with lower financing? That's going to be competitive financing. So all these things are pretty hopeful. The question, of course, is execution and long-term commitment, because as you know, especially in democracies like the US, governments can change every 4 years, and the views can change very radically, as you've seen from the Trump administration to the Biden administration. It's like night has become day here when it comes to climate change.
Indeed, execution, that's the big question. Nathan, thank you very much for that update. Nathan King live in Washington. Now, Libya's unity government is facing obstacles emerging from its formerly divided state institutions. The Libyan National Army has so far refused to merge its forces in western Libya to create a unified military. The LNA says that foreign fighters must first be evacuated before considering such a move. Here's Adel Mahri with more.
Since Libyan Prime Minister Abdelhamid Dbeibeh took office, he's been working to unify governmental bodies. So far, the unity government says it has brought back together 80% of its institutions. What remains, though, is the most difficult mission: to create a unified Libyan military force.
There isn't a roadmap for unifying the Libyan army. Even the Security Council's resolution this week confined the role of the 5+5 military commission to maintain the ceasefire. The commission was the nucleus for a unity army. It has 5 officers from both sides, but it is powerless. It can't reopen Libya's main highway or release the prisoners as agreed. They failed to bring the minor issue. How can they unify the military establishment?
This week, the head of the Libyan National Army's Moral Affairs Department said the eastern-based LNA won't consider unification with Western forces before foreign fighters leave the country. It's a prerequisite the Libyan Political Forum agreed upon in Geneva in January this year.
The military issue is sensitive and complicated. This file is also tied to the influence of international and regional powers. It's no secret, we have mercenaries in Libya. The first step and important step to unify the Libyan army is the departure of all these forces from Libya.
Analysts warn that none of Libya's most prominent politicians who were part of the political agreement and are leading the country now has power over the militias.
The domestic warlords are those who manage these foreign fighters. It is them who control the situation. These warlords still do not trust one another. What's holding the Western forces from advancing east is their fear of the Egyptian army's interference. And those in the Far East fear the Turkish forces. Libya's stability is therefore volatile because there isn't a real agreement that both sides welcome.
The UN estimates some 20,000 foreign fighters remain in Libya.
The UN's deadline to evacuate foreign fighters in Libya expired in January. To date, these fighters are still present and local militias are heavily armed, so they have the power to breach or uphold the current ceasefire. Libya's future is in their hands. Adel Mahroui, CGTN, Cairo.
Unknown gunmen have attacked yet another school in Nigeria's northern Kaduna state. At least one person has been killed and an unknown number of students kidnapped. Nigeria is dealing with heightened kidnapping attacks in different parts of the country. Our correspondent Philly Haza reports from Abuja.
The Kaduna State Internal Security and Home Affairs Office confirmed the attack on Greenfield University. A staff member of the private tertiary institution was killed in the attack. However, no details have been given on the number of students abducted. Authorities say a group of gunmen invaded the school on Wednesday evening, shooting sporadically before taking some of the students away. The latest attack is the 5th of its kind on academic institutions in Nigeria since December. In March, 39 students were kidnapped in the same Kaduna state from a federal college of forestry mechanization, and while 10 have been released, 29 remain in captivity. The Kaduna State Police Command says security operatives have been deployed to find and rescue the victims as well as apprehend the perpetrators. President Muhammadu Buhari has warned state governments to desist from paying any form of ransom to kidnappers and urged the armed forces to do more in safeguarding schools and students across the country. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
It's coming up to 20 minutes into the hour. Let's take our first break. Coming up, looking at the impact of climate change in Africa as the world marks Earth Day. And Zimbabwe unhappy over report adding both species of the African elephant to the red list of threatened species.
Africa is a continent of diversity, with varied climates and enchanting geography, and a people so distinct, but with a shared enduring spirit. We are at the heart of the continent to bring you the untold stories.
Let's have a look.
We celebrate Africa as it shapes its own destiny.
Tunis, Cairo,
Syria,
Juba,
Johannesburg,
Ethiopia, Tanzania.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
More than 27 million people in the Democratic Republic of Congo are facing acute hunger. That's according to a new study conducted by the World Food Programme and the Food and Agriculture Organization. The humanitarian agencies say the Central African nation is now home to the highest number of people in urgent need of food aid. CGTN's Chris Chamringa has more in this report.
Humanitarian agencies prepare to deliver food to people in the Democratic Republic of Congo. The country is facing acute hunger, according to a report by UN agencies. Women in the east and central parts of the country are the most affected, and that has left their children vulnerable to malnutrition.
The most recent results prove that there are over 27 million people that are in an acute food insecurity situation. Now, this represents more or less 1/3 of the total population. Now, having said that, the situation is very alarming, but these results do not show a deterioration compared to last year, but only an improvement of our methodology to collect and analyze data.
Ongoing conflict in the east of the country has wrecked the livelihoods of thousands of farmers.
Kwa sasa kabisa chakula imekuwa ngumu kupata.
Right now, food is very hard to find in eastern DRC because of the insecurity. Farmers no longer go to their fields because they fear being killed by armed groups. That's the root cause of the hunger crisis in our country.
The situation has been worsened by the economic decline caused by the COVID-19 pandemic. Its negative effects are being felt in other parts of the country. Heringe Nokma left school to support her mother in fending for their family in the capital, Kinshasa. They can only afford 2 meals a day.
Living here in Kinshasa is very difficult. We have to struggle to make ends meet. The money our mum gets from selling things really helps us to buy food and send my siblings to school.
The hunger crisis in the DRC has further put a strain on the government that is grappling with conflict in the east and multiple epidemics.
The food shortage in the DRC has coincided with the COVID-19 pandemic, which many foreign countries are battling to contain. That has affected the amount of assistance that the country has received to deal with the crisis. The WFP and FAO have consequently appealed for more funding from donors to save lives. Chris Chamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
Zimbabwean authorities have expressed reservations about a recent report from the International Union for Conservation of Nature. The report has added both species of the African elephant to the red list of threatened species. The move will make the country's lobby to be allowed to trade in ivory more difficult. Farai Mokutuya tells us more.
Zimbabwe is unhappy about some of the statistics in the International Union for Conservation of Nature, IUCN's findings, which it says unfairly paints the continent with one brush.
You cannot have a park, for an example, which is next to Gonarejo, having only 2 elephants. There's no way. There's a booming population in Gonarejo National Park, and obviously surrounding areas would have the same number of population, more or less. And like I said, Africa is not monolithic. What is happening in West Africa is not what is happening in Southern Africa.
Statistics show that Zimbabwe is home to the second largest elephant population in the world.
A wildlife census conducted in 2014 showed that Zimbabwe had over 83,000 elephants. That number has been growing at a rate of about 5% per annum, and authorities now say the jumbos have exceeded the habitat's carrying capacity.
That has led to frequent conflicts with human beings. The country desperately needs to sell some of its ivory stockpile to raise money to manage the elephants now more than ever before.
You know, COVID has hit us hard. We had to revise our budget by 70-80% in terms of income. For the better part of 2020, Victoria Falls was closed, so as many other parks. So we don't have much in terms of wildlife management, in terms of conservation. That's why we are saying these elephants must pay for their upkeep.
Conservationists want the IUCN findings to unlock help for countries like Zimbabwe.
Members of the IUCN, people who use IUCN as an opinion leader, take heed of their message that their countries that are looking after the elephant, they need support because they cannot close the gap between tourist income and the cost of conservation.
Zimbabwe's cash-strapped wildlife management authority is pinning hopes of raising revenue from trophy hunting during the forthcoming season, which begins May. Farai Mwakutuya, CGTN, Harare, Zimbabwe.
Farmers in Nigeria are among those in Africa who have suffered climate change-related losses, estimated at between $7 to $15 billion each year. The African Development Bank says that the impact of climate change on the continent could lead to $50 billion in losses each year by 2040. Our correspondent Philly Haza has more details from Abuja.
This vast and lush vegetation is owned by Solomon Ekwo. Due to the delay in rainfall this season, Solomon says he has had to spend a fortune tapping water from this river for his crops.
In my 10 years of farming, I've not witnessed a delay in rainfall as I have this season. It has made me spend so much on buying fuel, fixing my generator, and producing these vegetables to sell and make a profit.
The majority of farmers in Nigeria still depend on rainfall as a source of water for farming. This has made them vulnerable to the adverse effects of climate change like drought and flooding, creating unfavorable conditions for crop production and leading to food shortages and price rises in Nigeria. The AFDB has launched an Africa Adaptation Acceleration Program aimed at mobilizing $25 billion to help scale up access to modern farming methods for at least 30 million farmers in Africa, including in Nigeria. But experts say more steps have to be taken.
It's not about what African Development wants to do and how much money is being put forward or what the World Bank is doing and how much they're putting forward or what anybody is doing. It's about critical actions. So when it comes to raising awareness and consciousness, I think we've done fairly well. It's not just about federal government. No, every one of us has a role.
Experts say until farmers in Nigeria are taught how to modernize farming processes like irrigation, hydroponics and processing, the problem of climate change will continue to overwhelm them.
So if people know that, hey, the rain will not come, are there systems to save rainwaters when they're available? Are there systems to transport water and, use them? And this is where, developing countries should also become a lot more responsible in technology transfer. It's not enough for, for developed parts of the world to have all the solutions and technology without, transferring and exchanging this knowledge with developing countries that suffer the most or the brunt of the problem.
President Muhammadu Buhari has restricted credit facilities to farmers importing food or fertilizers.
Rather, a directive has been given to the Central Bank of Nigeria to focus more on funding local farmers, which will in turn reduce food prices in the market and prevent starvation in the country.
Solomon hopes that will feed through into higher production levels despite the impacts of climate change. Phil Ihaza, CGTN, Abuja.
To South Africa, where a mountain fire that wreaked havoc in Cape Town has also destroyed the country's oldest working windmill. The structure, which was built more than 2 centuries ago, is situated at the foot of Table Mountain. CGTN's Travis Andrews has more with this report.
Cape Town's Masted Mill is the oldest working windmill in South Africa, and it was one of the structures destroyed by the Table Mountain fire. The 220-year-old monument was gutted of its thatch roof caught alight by embers from the blaze. The mill had just undergone a revamp before the fire by the Friends of Masted's Mill. The group of enthusiasts usually look after the upkeep of the mill, but are now faced with its smouldering remains.
We finished repairing the brake, Andy and I, and we put the mill to bed, closed the door, patted ourselves on the back, walked away from the mill. And Sunday evening I drove up here. I was down in the South Peninsula to find everything we had done had been turned to ash.
Experts have been surveying the damage and salvaging whatever they can so that the mill can be rebuilt. The mill's small museum is usually open to visitors, but it now houses some of its salvaged metalwork.
My first priority was to collect whatever I could out of the mill, mostly the metal, because the metal in the mill is 220-year-old blacksmith's work before it got walked out of the gate. So we've got luckily a little room down there that survived the fire, and we're busy collecting all the metal so we can reuse it.
Since the mill was destroyed, many Cape Townians have come to see the destruction firsthand. Many are also hoping the monument will soon rise from the ashes and be restored to its former glory. While no time frame has been given for the completion of the repairs, work has begun in earnest to get one of Cape Town's most iconic monuments looking like new and open to the public again. That's Andrew, CGTN, Cape Town.
All right, it's time now to catch up with the day's business news. Let's cross over to Uche for the latest.
Thanks, Peninah. And coming up on Africa Live Biz. Kenya and the DRC enhance trade ties as the two presidents meet in Kinshasa. And hotels in Egypt look to 61% occupancy this year as the sector begins a recovery.
Africa is the nexus of enterprise, and global business will tell you why it matters.
From the mega investment projects to multi-billion-dollar mergers and acquisitions.
Africa today collects just in terms of revenues from taxes alone $545 billion a year. If you take 10% of that and you devote it to the energy sector, problem solved.
All this on Global Business, weekdays at this time on CGTN.
Every story starts out like this.
Okay. We'll head up now.
But beyond the rush of the numbers, there's always a more fundamental question. What happened? Who has been affected? When market-moving decisions are made, who's responsible? And why?
Let's get some reaction on ground. Joining us in Johannesburg is Sumitra Naidu. Hello, Nairobi.
This is how all stories begin. See how they end. Only on Global Business.
Africa Live. Find your voice.
Now, Kenyan President Uhuru Kenyatta and his Congolese counterpart Felix Tshisekedi have officially opened Equity BCDC Bank in the capital of the Democratic Republic of Congo. Equity Bank is headquartered in Nairobi, Kenya. Now, President Kenyatta is in Kinshasa for a 3-day state visit to enhance bilateral ties between Kenya and the DRC. Here's CGTN's Chris Ochamringa with more on this report.
President Uhuru Kenyatta arrived in the DRC capital, Kinshasa, on Tuesday to discuss ways of strengthening trade relations between the two countries. He was hosted by DRC President Felix Tshisekedi. The two leaders held talks about improving trade relations in the energy, mining, agriculture and construction sectors. They officially inaugurated Equity BCDC Bank in Kinshasa. The commercial bank's majority shares were bought by Kenya's Equity Bank Group last year at $95 million. It has now become the DRC's second largest financial institution. President Kenyatta is also expected to sign a military cooperation agreement with President Tshisekedi. The leaders plan to have a joint military campaign to end the conflicts in eastern DRC and boost trade in the region. Chris Ochamringa, CGTN, Kinshasa, Democratic Republic of Congo.
And the national airlines of Kenya and the Democratic Republic of Congo have also signed a partnership agreement. Kenya Airways and Congo Airways will partner in areas of mutual interest, including aircraft maintenance, as well as training and, of course, sharing of excess capacity. Now, the South African Music Rights Organization has clinched a multi-year licensing agreement with TikTok. The leading short-form video platform also signed a deal with Capasso, which is an association supporting African authors, composers and publishers. Here's Sumitra Naidu with more.
TikTok has become a massive sensation around the world. It was first launched in 2016 by Chinese company ByteDance. Today it has over 800 million active users across the world. A multi-year licensing deal with the media app is a big deal for African musicians.
South African artists can rest assured that their growth online on platforms like TikTok, because it's not only TikTok that's licensed in this way, Facebook is too, YouTube is as well. So they're able to monetize from their music.
The South African Music Rights Organization represents over 12,000 artists. Capasso also covers over 7,000 musicians directly or through their publishers. TikTok will pay royalties to all registered artists for their songs used on the platform.
This encourages the artists to also increase their visibility on the platform. We know that TikTok has been extremely helpful in the discovery of certain artists. I mean, some songs have literally just blown up by virtue of their visibility on TikTok.
This deal will cover 58 countries across the African continent. TikTok has around 6 million subscribers in South Africa alone.
The territories consist of mostly sub-Saharan countries. We do have some northern countries also in the deal. All our members, being composers and authors and publishing companies, would basically be receiving royalties from the usage of their works on the TikTok platform. What we did is we've negotiated the agreements, the rates, and all the intricacies on the collection element of those royalties.
Music by African songwriters and performers is already proving popular on TikTok. Master KG's Jerusalema dance was also a South African hit that went global through social media.
This is the first South African song that's cracked 300 million streams on YouTube. That's a lot of usage, and then there's a lot of money that is linked to that.
With COVID still restricting big events and prompting budget cuts, many artists are ensuring they have an online presence, especially on media platforms. Sumitra Naidu, CGTN, Johannesburg, South Africa.
Well, let's head to Egypt now. The country's hotel market may see occupancy rates of between 35 to 61% in 2021 as the tourism sector recovers. Now, Colliers International projects that the tourism hotspots of Hurghada and Sharm el-Sheikh, as well as the capital Cairo and Alexandria, will witness a double-digit year-on-year hike in occupancy rates. Well, CGTN's Yasser Hakim has more on the outlook for the country's hospitality sector.
The Colliers International report paints a positive picture for Egypt's hotel industry this year. This is despite the damaging coronavirus-led fallout that pummeled the industry in 2020. An average 38% occupancy rate is an improvement from the previous year, but is still half of the pre-COVID-19 rates.
Low expectation because of the pandemic. We did not receive many nationalities to the Egyptian destinations, just the East European, but all the West European like German, Dutch, Belgium, UK, they did not start arriving. So that's why the expectations are definitely it will never be same as 2019. It will take time. It will take at least two years to receive same number. Egypt started to have new source markets we have never received before for the leisure, like Romania, like from Moldova, from Serbia. So the market mix became totally different than before.
Ironically, despite the industry ailing due to the pandemic, Top Hotel News says there are 54 new hotels under construction in Egypt. These are expected to add 16,000 rooms to the market.
The return on the investment, they could see as well that it would be coming in a shorter period of time. Despite all the what has been happening, the government also has been supporting investors during the pandemic to ensure they are operational, to ensure that they are able to keep their workers. And all of these efforts by the government, when the investors find that the government is quite serious about it and is doing, they would approach the country to, to make their investments in it.
And Amr Karim, an executive at Travco Group, which owns 70 hotels, agrees that the North African country has potential for more investments.
It's inevitable for them because they can see that the tourism in Egypt, it will never die because of we have many different attractions. Even before the pandemic, most of the international chains, they said that they will have, let's say, 100 new hotels in Egypt, around 350,000 rooms. And I think this plan will never change because they can see what's going on now. The country is really, they concentrate and they want to invest in the tourism because of the impact of the GDP is very important. I mean, it was 9%. I think later on it will be more. So that's why they do care that to have more hotels in Egypt, especially luxurious hotels as well.
For now, players say the hotels that are still operating have had to cut costs and attract business from new markets. This is in a bid to survive the slump until there is recovery of tourism inflows. Yes, Hakim for CGTN, Cairo.
And moving on, a Nigerian engineer has fabricated an automatic hand washing machine using locally sourced materials. He says his goal is to curb the spread of COVID-19 in the north-central city of Jos in Plateau State, Nigeria. Here's correspondent Tessa Makende with the story.
40-year-old engineer William Gang is building his 6th automatic disinfectant hand washing machine. The machine has a sensor that dispenses liquid soap and water and carries out temperature checks without any touch by the user. It also has an alarm system that beeps once a person's temperature exceeds 40 degrees Celsius.
We also want to contribute, just like the doctors are putting effort to curtail the virus. So we felt we, as engineers too, we can also play a role. And then also, if we can be able to get support from much more capital from the government, and then so that we can be able to do more and establish an industry, so that we can even train the young coming youth, so that we can create job opportunity.
In major cities in Nigeria, like Lagos and Abuja, government and private offices, including shop centers, have invested a lot of money to import automatic disinfectant chambers to ensure COVID-19 protocols are followed while accessing buildings. But in smaller cities like Jos, where there are limited resources, a bucket of water, soap and a bottle of sanitizer are placed outside public places. But the method has not been very effective. The Nigerian Center for Disease Control says there have been over 160,000 cases of COVID-19 in the country, with over 2,000 deaths. William Gang says he was inspired to construct the machine to try and help the fight against spread of COVID-19. It can be operated using solar energy as well as electricity. Gang distributes the machines to government hospitals and other public places for less than half the price of imported ones. Some Nigerians who have used the machine say it's a welcome development.
The most important about this aspect of this machine is it's locally fabricated in Jos, and the technician handling it is easily accessible in case of technical malfunctioning.
Gang is now building a team of young apprentices to build more machines for the local and export markets. The Nigerian government has pledged nearly $300 million to invest in the health sector to boost innovations and expand its response to tackling COVID-19. The hope is that people like Gang will benefit from such funds to help reduce transmission figures of the disease through their inventions. Tessem Akende, CGTN Jos, Nigeria.
And that's all for now on Africa Live Biz. But coming up later on Global Business Africa, Nigeria has given its commitment to the International Monetary Fund to end petrol subsidies in the country. We'll look at the details and how the news has been received in Nigeria. Of course, all that coming up top of the hour. For now, back to you, Peninah.
Thank you, Uche. You're watching Africa Live. Coming up in sports. Tokyo Olympics test events resume after a hiatus due to the COVID-19 pandemic.
Mimi sijapiga nyongolo wasee pale kuna wasee wengi. Ninachezanga na dada yangu juu pia mimi sipendi kukufa. Ilikuwa ni asili yangu ndo pia familia yangu pia iweze kukula. Kwa hivyo mimi nacheza na dada yangu, akili yangu na macho yangu.
Kibira yenyewe ilikuwa mbaya kitambo, kulikuwa na wezi wengi sana. Na siku hizi yenyewe hata unaweza kaa bila kusikia hata mwizi ameshikwa mahali ama amechomwa ama amefanywa nini. Ndio naona yenyewe Kibira raundime si kama kitambo.
We only need a tool to bring change. And this tool to me, it can be educational background, it can be a skill, it can be a hobby of what you love.
I wanted to use my expertise in the media to nurture that talent, to mold them to become the future journalists.